Shalom, everybody. Welcome back to the Baal HaSulam's Matan Torah with commentary by Rebbe Avraham Morechai Gottlieb. We'll be referring to as the Rebbe Shlita. We are on page 115, towards the middle or so of the page, section 22. Last class we talked about the middle line towards the end of the class and the difference between the path of suffering and the path of Torah, but also acknowledge the bitter truth that regardless of the path we take, we will experience suffering. And that's a necessary prerequisite to all the steps in our spiritual progression. The difference being is that we can expedite our spiritual journey by bringing the suffering upon ourselves, meaning to say that we are self-critiquing and making an accounting of our soul, so to speak, and checking where our intentions are. Are we self-serving, egotistical? Are we giving, altruistic, and the like? We clarified that one is only to do this self-criticism, says the Baal HaSulam, a maximum of 30 minutes a day, and they should only go into the self-criticism from a place of shleimus, from a place of feeling completion, meaning you only start to self-criticize already from a place of joy. If you start from a neutral place, or somewhere even less than that, God forbid, then you fall into the trap of anxiety, depression, and things of that nature. God forbid. And then when we notice the evil within, when we notice the opportunities we have to work on ourselves, we're happy about it because we can't fix that which we can't see. And that darts us back to the middle. And that's called walking the middle line. So, we continue. The header reads in section 22, when the mitzvot are performed without self-love, there is no difference between love of the Creator and love of other people. A single mitzvah performed without self-serving love has a general effect on all the people of the world to advance them toward loving one another. Bold statement, but we've been speaking about this notion consistently that all of our actions can be akin to sesame seeds, small seeds being put on a scale. And as small as they are, they can literally tip the entire scale. In our case, the side of merit, of goodness, of refinement, of our spiritual character, or demerit, to disalign us from our purpose. The Baal HaSulam begins. This also explains the support for his view that Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, finds in the verse, quote, one sinner can destroy much good, from Ecclesiastes 9:18. It was already clarified above in section 20 that the sense of activation that comes over us from engaging in mitzvah between people and God is precisely the same as the activation that comes over us when engaging in interpersonal mitzvot. For the performance of all the mitzvot must be lishma, for the sake of heaven, for its own sake, without any hope for one's self-love. That is, no receiving of light or hope will come back to him for his trouble. No receiving by way of reward or honor or the like. It is here, in this exalted point, meaning lishma, doing things for the sake of giving, just for the sake of giving, that the love of the Creator and the love of one's fellow unite and actually become one. The Rebbe Shlita says here, his explanation is, as Baal HaSulam said above in section 13, anything which is outside of one, anything that is which is outside of us, is felt to be non-existent. And it makes no difference whether the other is God or another person. In contrast, he says in another place that we should meditate on and embody the notion that anything outside of oneself is the Creator. Because there's only two things ever going on in creation. There is the Creator and the creation. So we've been given our life. We wake up every morning in the same body. So we're to experience this creation, given that we're supposed to imagine that the entire world was made just for us, which is true in the sense that we're all portions of the one original soul of Adam Harishon. And because we're all pieces of Adam, technically, and the world was made for him, because the world was made for man in order to give goodness to man, so the world was made for you and I. And thus, everything outside of oneself is to be imagined, is to be meditated on as being the creator. Because all the people, all the events, anything that happens in our life outside of ourselves is him speaking to us, interacting with us, telling us something. And the truth is, also within, our very thoughts are said to come from him. So the point of independence, the point of individuality in essence is the free will on how to respond to the thoughts, whether we deflect them or meditate on them, whether we intend and act to do good and give, or bad by receiving, as that is our natural nature, our initial nature. The Baal HaSulam continues, therefore, when someone focuses on performing actions with the sole intention of pleasing another, the natural feeling is that these actions are empty and meaningless. But when the miracle occurs, that God gives us a new heart, which is the desire to give selflessly and love the other, then we truly love the other. And it makes no difference whether the other is God or another person. The translator adds here, the true performance of any mitzvah is done lishma. Because a mitzvah is not fully actualized unless it is done with proper intention, meaning to give nachar ruach, to give a spirit of pleasantness to the Creator, in order to give to the other. And if we do well and give to the other person, of course, without a doubt, we're also giving goodness to the Creator and giving him joy, so to speak, for his children are going in his way, the way of loving and compassion, and loving the neighbor as ourself, God willing, with his help. Therefore, the interpersonal mitzvot and the mitzvot between people and God are one and the same. Furthermore, the true goal of our living in this world is to attain a connection with God. The true source of loving another person is not the love of external features of the other, but rather the portion of God within the other. That is, it comes from loving God who is enclosed by the person. This is a skill and it needs to be practiced, just like emunah, to regulate oneself. Every hour, 30 minutes, 10 minutes, every minute if one can, but to have a thought on the Creator, to say thank you. Thank you for this breath. Thank you for this life. Thank you that I woke up this morning. Count the little things. Have the hoda'ah. We're called Yehudim, and it's from that language, to give thanks. And when we give thanks, it expands our vessels, increases our capacity to receive goodness, and therefore, ideally, we're receiving more goodness in order to give nachar ruach to the Creator. This connection to God, as we just said, to clarify, is devekus. Connection with the Creator is a matter of character, a matter of similarity of form. To be connected to the Creator means to be like the Creator. Of course, there's the practical things of actually speaking to the Creator as if He's right here, right now. The mitzvot and their actions that we have to embody by the body, like praying and the like. The true source of loving another person is not the love of external features of the other, but rather the portion of God within the other. So powerful. That is, it comes from loving God who is enclosed by the person, to acknowledge that each and every one of our souls, being that it's a chiluk Elokai mimal, it's a heavenly portion on high, it's a deposit from the Creator himself, we're all pieces of him, so to speak, a rock chipped off the old block, so to speak. So to acknowledge that everything a person, everything the other is doing is really the Creator expressing himself through that individual in a way. And through the acknowledgement and the thanks that we give to the Creator for every little thing in our lives, then we'll have the tools to see the Creator within that individual, the qualities of the Creator being actualized by that individual. And if not, the potential of those qualities being actualized one day. For example, in the case of chinuch, of education, of children, those who have very difficult characters, for example, let's say they are impatient, fiery nature, they like to fight other kids and the like, they don't listen so much, they're stubborn. So the Baal Shem Tov says that every single midah, all the characteristics that we have a holy root. There's no such thing as a bad character trait. Rather, there's just character traits used badly. Every single thing given to us by the Creator has a very holy root. In the case of stubbornness, for example, to acknowledge in the child, wow, one day they're going to grow up and be an amazing servant of the Creator. And they're going to be stubborn about it. They're not going to budge. They're going to say, I'm doing this, I'm following this, and that's that. These are the virtues and the principles I stand by, and I'm not moving. It's a beautiful thing. That's a holy stubbornness. Rav Kook also talks about, Rav Kook Zatzal talks about the notion of holy chutzpah. Chutzpah is kind of like maybe for lack of a better translation, arrogance. In a way can be a sort of ego, or it can be interpreted as such. And he says the holy chutzpah in this generation is the chutzpah to say that we absolutely, undiplomatically need Kabbalah. We need the inner dimensions of the Torah, or else we're not going to get to where we need to get to in a speedily, efficient fashion that I'm sure the Creator wants of us, because that's our potential. In contrast to the path of suffering, as we talked about in the last class, and being forced from the back, pushed towards our desired goal through much pain and suffering. So the holy chutzpah would be the holy actualization of a chutzpah that would normally be perhaps seen as disrespecting elders, or claiming to be right and claiming to know what the truth is and know what must be done. In our case, we do say that. We say undiplomatically that the truth is the wisdom of truth. We call Kabbalah the chokhmat ha'emet, the wisdom of truth. And we know without a doubt that it is the only way, obviously met with the physical aspects of the mitzvot, but it is the only way met with the rest of Judaism and its details to reach our desired state. All the Kabbalists speak about it. The Zohar itself says in Parshas Naso, Otsadi, that it's through this book, it's a meta statement, the Zohar is talking about itself, but it's through this book, the Zohar, that Klal Yisrael will come to the Geula Shlema, Birachamim, with mercy, with loving kindness. And all the Kabbalists say repeatedly about how the wisdom of truth will slowly but surely over time become more and more revealed as we approach the end of the correction process. And we can say logically too, if one is somewhat familiar with the system, let's say the Sefirot, for example, and how our holy literature has corresponding aspects in the Sefirot. For example, the 5 books of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Chumash, is from the aspect of Chagat, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes. The Nevi'im, the books of the prophets, are Netzach and Hod. And then the Ketuvim, the writings, many of which are kings, are considered Malchut. And the Kabbalah is considered the upper 3 Sefirot. Keter, Chochmah, Bina. You can add Das also into the parameter. So to finish the system, to fully load the program that is our correction, let's say we're at the 95% load mark, and we need that to download the last 5% into the system in order to complete the program. We need that. We need that last piece. And that last piece is the hidden true wisdom that will hopefully more and more so become revealed. To continue, we're on page 116, bottom paragraph. The Baal HaSulam continues, thus, one who acts lishma has a general effect on all the people of the world by advancing them a certain measure and climbing the ladder of loving the other. Whether it be large or small, ultimately joins the future measure that will tilt the scale of the world to the side of merit, since his or her share has been added and joins the amount that shifts the balance. As above in section 21, examine there the sesame seeds allegory. Right, as we stated, even small sesame seeds, one action after one action, can tip the entire scale, the side of good. The Rebbe says, our Rabbi Baal HaSulam teaches us that our thoughts and desires are absorbed in the space of the world, and a person's thoughts and desires get transferred from him or her to other people. Therefore, by virtue of how we conduct ourselves, including our thoughts and desires, we create a particular quality that gives direction to the whole world. And although our influence does not appear to be determinative, nonetheless, each of us certainly contributes to the world in this non-physical way. A sesame seed is tiny and almost weightless, just as we can view ourselves to be very small and incapable of making a decisive impact on the world. Baal HaSulam says that despite an individual's smallness, his or her minute act can tilt the individual scale to the side of merit. That is, the side of having love of the other and of loving God. And then he or she transmits these messages to the entirety of the world, messages of love and anti-egoism, which eventually tip the scale of the world, because we're all one. And the Baal HaSulam is not the first one to speak about a collective consciousness and a unified consciousness. Such ideas are actually very prevalent in the New Age communities of the world, because it has this most holy root. It is a true notion, and it's rooted in the Chochmat Emet of the Jewish tradition. We are all one soul, splintered from Adam Harishon. The Rebbe continues, the opposite is also true. Whenever a person tilts his or her scale to the side of demerit, that is the side of self-love, he or she transmits to the world messages of self-love, and in this way, his or her particular quality tilts the scale of the world to the side of demerit. Here, there are 2 possible situations. A, someone who relates to serving God but falls into self-love is pained by this, and thus causes others in the world to be pained by their own self-love. Or B, someone who acts out of self-love and is fine with this, and in this way will affect the world so that people will accept their self-love. Obviously, the first option is better, to acknowledge one's self-love and to feel the tsar, to feel the pain from one's own ego is a very great thing. It's to be very respected and elevated, as opposed to being okay with it and just moving along. We have to notice it. We have to be self-aware. And the Baal HaSulam says, there's a story of when a student revealed to him his own difficulties in that he noticed all this evil and ego within himself. And the Baal HaSulam was like, wow, amazing. Great. So happy for you. What a salvation. And the student was confused. What do you mean? I'm so rotten. I'm so down. And the Baal HaSulam says, when you notice the truth, it's like turning it into dust. So just the awareness, just the acknowledgement, just seeing the opportunity and the issues themselves is already a correction. It's already a major tikkun. It's a lot of work to be done after that, but first things first, to acknowledge, to be aware. Take note, the stronger the personality one has, that is, the stronger his or her will, then the more he or she will be able to affect the world with decisive actions. Meaning to say that if you have a strong will, if you have a strong desire, you have a big kli, you have a big vessel. If you have more to work with, then you're more influential. In terms of the spiritual mechanism of each and every individual, we all have different portions. And it's not to say that one portion is better than another, just the way that the Creator made it. A king will not give a son that can only handle 1 acre of land 100 acres. And he won't give someone who can handle 100 acres 1 acre. Furthermore, the more we are connected to God, then the greater our inner vitality. And consequently, the greater will be our influence on others. Thus, there is no need to run around the world to distribute material, to make sure that one has as many students and followers as possible. Rather, according to the above, it would suffice that we straighten our intentions and actions, and in this way, we will be affecting the greatest activity for the world's sake. It says, see also the preface to the Zohar, section 65, FF. In any case, the preface to the Zohar and the introduction to the Zohar are amazing books. And someone, whether they're getting their feet wet or they're already been swimming in the Chokhmah, if they haven't read it, should absolutely pick it up. It's just an English translation, beautiful English translation by Yehudah Cohen. You can find it on most bookstores. Amazon, in particular, I think is a great option. However, when someone has not worked on himself or herself, but already leaps to the role of trying to influence others, then he or she puts out vibrations that have, to a large extent, an external and a false quality. And the bitter truth is that most outlets, an outlet being anything that's exuding information, anything that's exuding this vibration, this energy, is on the negative side. And I don't mean to be pessimistic or anything like that. Just a matter of truth in the sense that the world is in the path of suffering. We are in Gullus. We are in exile. The Zohar speaks about the particular state of being right before the Mashiach is darkness within darkness. It's double concealment, meaning we're so deep in our exile, we don't even know we're in exile. We can't even acknowledge it. We don't even know what the first step of true inner work is. Rather, the average religious individual might believe that coming to shul, praying 3 times a day, eating their meals and keeping Shabbos, and the like is enough. And if they do it decent enough at the end of their life, they'll go upstairs and hopefully they'll get some good check marks. And then, if not, they'll be back for more. But we learned that we can do the job while we're alive. We do not need to wait till our soul has left our body. We can do the job while in the goof, while in the body. And we can experience Olam Haba, the world to come, while being in Olam Hazeh. We're supposed to fuse the two, ideally. So to Hashem, we should rise to higher vibrations speedily and soon. The Baal HaSulam continues, but someone who commits a single sin, which means that he or she cannot overcome or conquer his or her contaminated self-love, and hence impulsively steals of the like, sentences himself or herself and the whole world to the side of demerit. For in the revealing of the contamination of self-love, the lowly aspect of creation regains its force. Thus, he or she subtracts a certain amount from the final measure that would tilt the scale of the world to the side of merit. Just like the person removing from one side of the scale that single sesame seed that a friend had put there, and thereby he or she raises slightly the side of demerit. In this way, the world is turned backward. As scripture states, but one sinner destroys much good. From Ecclesiastes 9:15. Because one person could not overcome a petty lust, he or she pushed back the spirituality of the whole world. Such strong language. Who are we to imagine that every little misalignment that we have or do is literally descending the entire level of the entire world and all of humanity in that moment? It's difficult. That's the bitter truth. That is the mechanism. That's the spiritual dynamic. Maybe relatively speaking, there's more Rahmanas, there's more mercy today because of our lowly generation. Because of the Yeridos Hadoros, the descending of the generations. On one side, we're the lowest. We have the most distractions and the most oviut, the most coarseness, the most ego, the most chutzpah. But at the same time, there are parameters that say it's not fair to compare. Because even though we're the lowest, at the same time, because we have the most challenges, it's all relative then. So we can technically be the highest, because if we succeed despite the challenges, then we're drawing down the greatest lights, finishing the system, finishing the download, so to speak, as I mentioned. But it's interesting to contemplate, too, the notion of one person who could not overcome a petty lust, he or she pushed back the spirituality of the whole world. But also to consider how we see this practically in the world, and how one person can shift the entire world to the side of darkness, are world leaders who do not obviously abide by anything close to Torah and Mitzvot. And I'm speaking about the extreme cases, let's say dictators and the like, who are exuding a negative frequency, a negative vibration and energy to the world. And the mass amount of people they have following them are doing the same. And they're just spreading the darkness. They're very simple notion, very simple 2 + 2 kind of idea to see the idea that one person can bring the whole world to the side of the merit. That's more tangible because these are people who have a reach and have those positions of power. But I could be wrong, but I'm under the impression that any Jew all the more so abiding by Torah mitzvot already, has way more influence spiritually than any world leader who is not Jewish. Again, Jewish and not Jewish, in the deepest sense of the word, are just characters of our being. Because in truth, by the deepest spiritual definition of the word, as we mentioned very early in this series, we're all non-Jewish. We're all goyim. We're all trying to become Jewish. Because to be Israel, Yashar Kel, means to be Lishma, to be giving to give, to already reach that exalted state of being a tzaddik. That's a high state. That's lofty. So we're trying to do that. We're trying to be converts. But even so, I'm speaking from a basic halachic sense. If one is born Jewish, even so, having that dynamic already, I think, has a huge influence, whether we see it or not, whether we can observe what's happening in the upper worlds. And as a whole, by our actions, I think any one person that is within the framework of the Brit Kodesh, the holy covenant that is Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, is more influential than world leaders. My idea. I could be wrong. The Rebbe Shita says on this paragraph regarding the thievery of our self-love, note that our sages said that Adam was a thief, as said in Midrash Tanhuma in Leviticus. Rebbe Baruch Shalom Ashlag explained that the idea behind theft is that the thief transfers from another's domain to the thief's domain. And we see that Adam drew the divine light called the tree of knowledge into his private domain, his vessels of self-love, due to the extraordinary pleasure of eating the fruit. Therefore, the idea of theft is not related to a particular kind of act. Rather, anything done out of self-love is called theft. Again, a bitter but true statement that we're all thieves. I'm saying all because how many of us have truly passed the threshold and become tzaddikim? We're constantly enjoying the pleasures of life and not acknowledging that the Creator gave it to us. Even something as simple as saying a blessing, as simple as it is in practice, it's of the deepest magnitude. It is better to, before drinking a glass of water, to say, thank you, God, for the water, and then drink it, than saying nothing. It's still some acknowledgement. It's still opening some channel. But the sages gave us very exacting formulas. We have exacting blessings and exacting foods, whether from the trees or from the earth, or general things like drinks and meat. Meaning to say, if we're not doing even the basic halacha, the basic mitzvot, even if our intentions may be right, in the sense that we want to be giving, we want to acknowledge the Creator, it's still considered thievery. It's still considered theft. Because we can't reach that state. We can't be giving to give without the practical mitzvot. There is not a single piece of authentic literature that says that any person can reach these exalted levels without both the practical mitzvot and the inner dimensions of the Torah, being the intentions behind the mitzvot. And even someone who says the formula and says the exact blessing, the bracha, can still be a thief. Because if it's done out of self-love, whether I'm just going to say the bracha to remove my obligation and the like, that's still in the same notion. That's still thievery. So I looked in the gematria and checked ganav, thief. Ganav is 55, which is the same gematria as domeh, stillness. Perhaps also pronounced duma in different parameters, but it can also mean grave. And I think the notion is that if we're at the level of a thief and we're not acknowledging it, we're not making movement, we're in stillness. If we're in stillness, if we're not moving back and forth, because we should always be in movement in order to come to our desired purpose, then we're in the grave. We're dead. Because to be alive is to be connected to the life of all lives. The atbash of ganav, which is the opposite corresponding numerical value, where an aleph becomes a taf, a bet becomes a shin, and the like. It's 509. And if you add 1 for the kolet principle, because you can add 1 to any gematria, because the aleph, which is representing the creator, is the one behind all things, all concepts, all words, all principles, is being formed and manifested in the moment because the creator is behind it all. So there's that invisible aleph with anything. So 509 can turn into 510, which is the gematria of yashar, straight. Just as Yisrael is yashar kel. So a thief by definition is someone who's crooked, and the atbash is hinting at the correction of that, of being straight. Because without the acknowledgement of our thievery, we can't become straight. We need to see our stillness. We need to acknowledge that we're in the grave because of our thievery. And only through the pain of that acknowledgement, that self-awareness, can we then become yashar. Tov. I think that's good for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Till next time. All the best. On the chance that someone's watching, maybe there's a question on the live stream. I will check. No. No questions. All the best.